Okay, I think we're live. Can someone let me know that you can see and hear me okay in the chat here? This is our first ever live stream. I hope I've set it up right. Everything looks okay to me. Oh, nice. Thank you. Jan can see and hear. Thank you, Jan. All right, this is amazing. This is so cool. I've been so excited. I've been looking forward to this all day. So, you know, until now, pretty much, well, not pretty much, all of the content that we've made has been kind of made and then released. And this is the first time that we've done something that's like genuinely interactive. So like, yeah, this is so cool. This is great. Great stuff. Okay, yeah, cool. I can see audio and video look great. Cool t-shirt. Thanks, Jeff. Fellow Floyd fan. I like it. So yeah, I guess to begin with, everybody, I should just say a huge thank you to everybody who, everybody who supports our work and our channel and National Guitar Academy in general, but also thank you for all of the comments that and questions that you submitted. There's like so many cool things there that people asked. I've been reading through them as they've been coming in. But obviously, if you want to ask any more questions now, then please do so in the chat here. There's no need to use that other link. We just use that other link because I don't think it's possible on YouTube for people to submit questions before the event's gone live, I think. So that's why we use the other link for that. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. Like, if it's a success, if you guys enjoy it, then we may do these more regularly and we'll figure out how to do it. And of course, as things get going, we'll improve the audio and the video here as well. But this is great. Thank you, everyone. I can see all the comments coming in here. This is so cool. Yeah, where are you all from? Like, where's everyone? I can see Spain, hi from the UK, Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, nice, London, wow, Estonia, Norway, Argentina. Wow, I love Argentina. Australia, nice, that's where my brothers live. Belgium, Thurrock, Scotland, Canada, Florida, Nottingham. Wow, this is great. So cool. Thank you, everyone, for putting your feedback in here. And what an amazing thing. I'm just old enough to remember before the internet was a thing. So, like, I'm still amazed by this, that we can all connect in this way, which I shouldn't be because it's been around for like 25 years or something. But anyway, let's get to it. Let's dive in. I hope you've all enjoyed the GuitarFest event that we put on. We were just trying to spread a bit of positivity and fun in the world. Everything's a bit doom and gloom at the moment, isn't it? I'm fed up with COVID, and every day I put the news on, it's Trump and Boris and all the rest of it. It's just like, I don't care. Just give me my guitar. Give me a pint of Guinness, and I'm a happy man. And I hope you've all brought beer. It's early in the day for some Americans, but hey, it's 9 o'clock at night here. All right, cool. Let's dive in. David Sargent. Hey, Dave. Good to see you. Good to see you, Warrington. Yeah, some familiar faces popping up here. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and supporting us in this. All right, so, guys, we need to get to your questions. This is a Q&A session. So I suppose we should dive in with the first Q&A. But yeah, I mainly just wanted to say thank you to everybody for coming along, for supporting the event. And I hope you've been enjoying all the stuff that we've been putting out as part of GuitarFest. I wanted to just make it like an explosion of fun, positivity, and good times. So let's dive into your questions. All right. Okay, cool. So one of the questions that we got asked, it came through as anonymous. I'll have to change that for next time. It feels a bit naff to like reply to somebody when their name's just anonymous. You know what I mean? We'll change that for next time, I think. But for now, so the top rated question that we had, the top voted question that we had was, I'm self-taught and feel as though I have hit a plateau. Where do I go next? Any advice? I know basic bar chords and different strumming patterns. All right, so whoever you are who wrote that, who submitted that question, I think the plateau, the dreaded plateau, is very common. And I'm a self-taught guitarist as well. I mean, nobody's really self-taught, are they? Like, we all, you know, even if we're just playing songs that other people wrote, we're learning off them. We're standing on the shoulders of giants all the time. But yeah, I'm self-taught, which means I learn the hardest possible way, you know. And I have hit that plateau several times, many times over the years. And, you know, so first of all, I know what that feels like. But also what I would say is everybody hits that plateau. And actually, there isn't just one. There's several along the way. Like, your progress as a guitarist isn't a linear line that just, you know, goes up all the time. It kind of wiggles around, and, you know, and there's bits where it stays flat. And what I would say is when you hit that point, you have to intentionally learn some new stuff. So one of the things that I did a few years ago when I kind of felt like, you know, I'm doing all the same stuff, you know, I'm not really getting any better. Things are starting to sound the same when I pick up the guitar. Was I actually went and did my musical grades, which was something that I'd never done before. And it was really cool, you know, like some of it was really basic stuff. You know, on like grade 1 and grade 2, there was lots of stuff that obviously seemed very simple to me. But as I progressed through it, there were loads of little holes in my knowledge that got filled in because I was intentionally learning from a structured program. I don't know what the equivalent of that would be. I used the rock school grades here in the UK. I don't know what the equivalent of that would be in the US or Canada or Australia or elsewhere in the world. But I would encourage you to seek out structured learning programs, you know, because like obviously, you know, all of our stuff, the National Guitar Academy, those courses are perfect. They are structured learning. But also you don't have to do like boring sort of music courses, you know, or colleges or anything like that. You can another great example of a way to learn and get past the plateau is play with other musicians. Nothing will improve you faster than playing with other musicians. And so many guitarists just play alone at home. And I know why that is. A lot of people don't feel confident enough to go and connect with other guitarists. But you've got to do it because it's lots of fun. Music to me it should be a shared thing. It should be a shared experience. So what I would say is if you feel like you're at the plateau, you have to do some new things. Yeah. So just to condense this down into a simple answer, if you've hit the plateau, you've got to do some new things. Do some extra learning, buy a guitar book, enroll in a course, go and jam with some other people. You know, I used to have a boss years ago. You've probably heard me say this before. But I used to have a boss years ago who always used to say, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And it used to really annoy me. But he was right. And it's the same, you know, in the guitar world. So if you feel like you're stuck in a plateau, you want to get better at the guitar, you've got to try some new stuff. Play with other musicians, enroll in some courses, buy some books. A couple of books that really helped me, I'm just looking at my bookshelf here, was the Eric Andreas book. You know, he's the Guitar Sage guy. Like, wow, his book was amazing. That was really helpful for me. There's loads of useful books on Amazon. But what you find is when you buy some of those books, you'll already know a lot of the stuff that's there, but there'll be a few little nuggets of useful information in there. And sometimes they can be the final piece of the jigsaw where it's like, right. And you'll see how one thing relates to another from a different angle. Things like keys, scales, the circle of fifths and all of that jazz, you know, you need to see those things from multiple angles before you understand what they are. All right, cool. Spent quite a long time on that question because it was the top rated one. But on these other questions, I'm going to try and move through them a bit more quickly. But before I do, I'm just having a look in the chat here to see what's happening here. Have you got blackcurrant in that Guinness, Mike? There's no blackcurrant in it, Bill. It's pure Guinness. Yeah, nearly all of my great-grandparents were from Ireland, so like this stuff's in my blood. Yeah, Patty, I hear you. Learning guitar is your reprieve from all the insanity. Wow, I hear you so much. Music is the ultimate escape. It's fun. It's fabulous. Great, guys. These are really brilliant. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to reply to more because there's so many comments that are coming in. But rest assured that we will look through all these comments after the event, and any stuff that we don't pick up here in this video, we'll pick up on email. Or in fact, I think what we'll do is we'll make a page on the site. We'll put it on nationalguitaracademy.com/livestream. So any of the resources that I recommend today, and there's going to be loads and loads, if you just give us like until, I don't know, half an hour or an hour after the event, we'll get all that stuff on the website. So the things I'm going to refer to in some of my answers today, that's where they'll be. All right, it's 9:10. There's like a million questions here that we need to get through. So let's get to them. Right, let's have a look at the next one. This is brilliant. Okay, so this is another question from Anonymous. And the question is, how to practice arpeggios? Is it only through sweeps? Okay, now arpeggios, for those of you that don't know, are when we condense a chord down to its, sort of when you distill a chord as much as it can. So if you think of an A chord, so an A arpeggio would be, so you're just pulling out the first, the third, and the fifth of that chord. And within that, you can have lots of fun with that. But kind of, straight up arpeggios would just be, and it gets a bit dull, gets a bit boring. For years and years, I heard the word arpeggio and thought, wow, that sounds cool and Italian and romantic and special. But actually, all it really means is you're playing the notes of the chord individually. And that's it. It's nothing more fancy than that. But it's very powerful, because if you're ever not sure what to add to a piece of music, then an arpeggio for whatever the chord is will always work. So arpeggios are like the ultimate fallback option for a lead guitarist, because it will work. But to answer the question specifically, rather than just doing it up and down in sweeps, which gets really dull, there's a couple of things that I'd suggest. So number one, put it into a chord progression and follow a chord progression around. So there's a song that I wrote. Let me use the electric guitar for this. So this is a song that I wrote years ago. But I ended up playing a little bit of lead in it, arpeggio style, which really worked. So I'm hoping this isn't going to be too loud. I'm hoping that isn't going to drown out the microphone too much. All right, so the chord progression was E. This was like a rock track. Okay, so that was the chord progression, but I wanted something, it was a bit too gamey, there was a bit too much going on, so I wanted to simplify it, so I used arpeggios. So when that chord progression there, which is a bit busy, gets reduced to arpeggios, I came up with this lead line, which I think works much better than the chords. Let's try that again. So that's, a bit, I was playing that, obviously that's quite a fast and quite a busy riff, but that's just an example of how reducing something to an arpeggio can make, like, it can carry a chord progression all by itself, and it's a fabulous way to practice arpeggios. Now, obviously that one is at quite a high tempo, and it was over 4 movable shapes. So if you're a beginner guitarist, then obviously that will have been too advanced probably for you to understand what was going on. But I hope you got the message that it's much more fun to practice arpeggios moving around the fretboard in a musical context than it is to just sit there in like a really dull way, just doing arpeggios like some kid practicing classical piano or something, So as far as arpeggios are concerned, they're really, really powerful, but practice them over songs and practice them in chord progressions where you can. And also play them in different positions. So that one I was playing there was in I was using E-shaped. You know, think about the cage system. So you don't have to just play arpeggios starting off on the E string, on the low E string. You can play them on the 5th string or anywhere else, on the 4th string, anywhere else where you want to. Moving them around the fretboard gives you a different feel. And thankfully, the arpeggio pattern stays exactly the same on the 6th and 5th strings, whether you start on either one of those, it stays the same. Until the B string becomes involved, the arpeggio pattern is the same. So it's a movable shape. You can play it anywhere you want to. Arpeggios are super, super cool, really easy to wrap your head around. I mean, when you think about it, it's like the shortest scale in the world playing an arpeggio, but it works over anything. What I would just say for this point before we go on to the next question is, anything that you hear us speak about today and you're like, oh, wow, I don't get that. That's just gone straight over my head. What I would say is go onto our website, just Google National Guitar Academy arpeggios, or National Guitar Academy cage system, or National Guitar Academy bar chords, or whatever it might be. And there'll be a guide on the site that I've written for like everything you can think of. There's hundreds and hundreds of guides on there. And we'll go much deeper on it there than obviously I could do here in the video. So if something crops up and you're like, oh, that sounds cool, but Mike didn't really explain the whole thing that well, then just Google National Guitar Academy plus that thing, and you'll find a guide that's for it. One of the things that's quite challenging for this when we do this type of stuff is that I don't know what level you guys are at, you know, if you're beginners or advanced guitarists, but I know from that question that wasn't from a beginner. So that's why that one was a little bit more complicated. So if you're a beginner guitarist, I hope that wasn't too advanced for you. All right, before I go to the next question, I'm just checking in with the chat here. Will this be archived for later viewing? Yes, Jerry, thank you for asking. It will. Sex, gyms, and rock and roll, a bit of an Ian Jury reference there. Thank you, Bill. Marco, how did John Lennon learn bar chords? I'm not sure, but it probably happened in Hamburg, I'm going to say. Mike, is the lefty lessons as extensive as the right-hand course? No, it's not, James. I wish it was, mate. I really do. Unfortunately, we don't cater for left-handed guitarists that well because we would have to film everything all over again. It's really annoying. I wish we had a better solution. As daft as it sounds, what a lot of lefties do is they watch our courses and watch our stuff with a mirror. Some students use it with a mirror to just instantly make it lefty friendly. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but it works. All right, cool. So let's keep going. Dave, Sergeant, Bill, thank you for your comments. Okay, let's go on to the next question. I'd like to play, this is another one from Anonymous. He's busy, he's a busy bloke, isn't he, this Anonymous? I'd like to play a chord progression and add a wee solo. I think this fella's Scottish. I'd like to play a chord progression and add a wee solo using minor pentatonic here and there. How can I make this join up and sound good? Okay, so this is like a classic question that we get asked a lot of the time, which is how can I blend chords with lead? And there's a million different ways that you can approach this, but essentially what I'd say is to practice it, you need to know what key the piece of music is in. So for argument's sake, so for people who don't know about keys, a key is like a collection of notes that sound good together. And all songs have a kind of natural key that is almost like the cosmic background for that particular track. It's the tonal center for that track. And it's almost always the first chord of the song. And it's always the last chord of the song. So if there's a particular song that you like and it starts with the C chord, and it ends with the C chord, that song will be in the key of C, almost certainly. So that means, okay, cool, this song is in the key of C. So if you play the scale of C major over that song, it will work over the whole song, more than likely. Not all the time, but most of the time. So if you want to blend lead with chords, and you know the song is in the key of C, then you could play any of the notes from the C major scale and that would work. So where are we? So you know that those notes would work. Or you could also use the key of A minor, because that's the relative key to C major. So to answer the question specifically, how do you blend them together? Well, what I found working is what I find works for me is if you're playing independently, so it's literally just you and you're trying to accompany yourself, then what you want to do is kind of strike the. Let me get the electric guitar. But what you want to do is play the first on the first beat of a new chord. You have to play that chord, and then you can go off and do something else. So let's say, for example, you were playing. Let's say you were playing like a blues pattern, and you were playing an E. So let's keep this really simple and say we're playing an E. I'm going to play an E minor pentatonic. So if I just want to play the blues progression around, hope this is okay audio wise. All right, so I'm playing an E. I'm doing some blues, and I want to accompany myself as I play. Well, obviously, I can't strum the chords all the time and play lead guitar all the time. It's just not going to happen. But what I can do, if I want to give myself enough time to add some lead, is just hit the first beat of that chord. So something like, this is like an exercise that I do a lot of the time with new students. So you just get a bit of a groove going, and I'm just holding the top of an E minor chord there. Once you've established that rhythm, can you see how I was kind of hitting the first beat of the chord and then going off and doing some lead, and then coming back and hitting the first beat of the next chord and then going off and doing some lead? That's a nice way to practice it, because obviously if you're playing by yourself, you can't do both guitar parts at the same time. So if you want to accompany yourself or blend a little bit of lead, or to go back to the question, add a wee solo over a piece of, over some chords, then make sure you're playing in a scale that matches the key. I'm going to say that again because it's so important. Make sure that you're playing in a scale that matches the key, because then you know every note will work no matter what you play. Play in a scale that matches the key. And if you want to accompany yourself, just play the first beat of the chord as the chord, and then go off and have a little noodle. Play whatever you want in that scale. You know it'll work okay. And then come back to the chord. As long as you're hitting the first beat of the chords at the right time, then the song is coherent. It sits together well, and it allows you to go off and kind of improvise and then come back and know that things are still moving forward in a satisfying musical way. Of course, it's completely different if you're playing with someone else, because you don't need to hit those chord progressions. A great way to practice that is actually just with somebody else playing bass guitar. You don't have to have a rhythm guitarist. You can just have a bass guitarist holding down root notes, and then you can noodle away over the top from a lead guitar perspective. Okay, I hope this is useful. Scottish accent with too much Guinness. Don't worry, I haven't had that many. Honest, I really haven't. Circle of fifths, Mark. That, yeah. Do you know what the circle, right, super quick, circle of fifths. I've never found a practical application for the circle of fifths. It's one of those things that, like, people hear the phrase and it's like, oh, it sounds really cool and kind of music theory-ish and highbrow. But I've never found a practical use for it. I don't understand the purpose of knowing it. I understand how it can help you understand some aspects of musical theory. But as a guitarist in day-to-day use, I don't know. I've never really found, and I've asked people who are very serious musicians who know about this stuff, I've asked them, what's the purpose of it? Why is it useful to know this stuff? And no one's ever been able to give me a good answer. So if you know one, please let me know. Drop it in the comments here, or send me an email, mike@nationalguitaracademy.com, because I'd love to know. The circle of fifths essentially just explains the progression of some different keys, but I don't, like I say, I've never really found it that useful to know. Okay, we're going on to the next question. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, just out of interest, before we carry on to the next question here, how many of you are on our email list, and like that's how you heard about this event? Was it? I'm wondering, did you guys come from Instagram, or did you come here from our website or from our email list or wherever? Like, let us know in the comments. I'd love to know. Emma Scottish. Okay, so that's why you appreciated the my terrible Scottish accent. Nice. Okay, mostly on the email list. Brilliant. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, great. Brilliant. Oh, this is great being able to see all the feedback from you all. Thank you. All right, let's keep going. Right, so this is something that my dad always goes on about. So this is a question from someone that says, any tips on moving same shaped bar chords up and down the fret? So this is, sorry, the full question is, any tips on moving the same shape bar chords up and down the fret? It never sounds right. I'm not 100% sure what that question means. I don't know if they mean that they're getting fret squeak, which a lot of people do. So when they go from playing something like, I don't know if they were, can you hear that? That noise? And we got some other questions that were relating to this. So I think that's what this person is asking. Now that fret squeak sound that you get as you move, as you slide around the strings, this is one of those weird things where it really doesn't bother me at all. And I know it doesn't bother lots of other musicians, but for some people, once they hear it, they really obsess over it and they can't stand it. They want to get rid of it. So what I would say is two things. Number one, I quite like hearing that sound because it sort of reminds me that I'm playing a piece of wood. You know, it kind of connects me to the instrument. And I don't mind when I hear that sound on recordings either. But I hope that's coming through on the audio. But like, I don't mind that. If I hear that on an audio, I actually quite like it because it makes me feel like I'm there hearing the performance. But for people who really do hear it and dislike it, there's a couple of things that you can do. So number one is the most obvious one, which is just to relax your tension on the strings as you move them. So that sound happens when your strings are in quite tight, when your fingers are in quite tight contact with the strings. So if you just relax your fingers before you move, that will stop that from happening. Well, not stop it, but it reduces it. And then the second thing is, if you make sure that you get you can get it from any guitar shop, buy some fast fret, which is like I don't know what you call it. It's like a lubricant essentially that goes over the strings. And what that does is it allows your fingers to move more smoothly over them. It makes you a faster guitarist, but also it massively reduces that fret squeak sound. Just be careful though, because you only need a little bit of fast fret. If you put too much on, the strings get really kind of slippy and it's quite hard to like target where you want to go to. But yeah, it's still handy stuff to have. And when you change your strings, that's quite a good time when you change your strings to maybe put some lemon oil on the neck of your guitar and then put the fast fret on the strings. You know, make sure you clean your fretboard. Lemon oil after you've cleaned it, new strings on, fast fret, and then you feel like you've got this, you know, it's like your guitar has been tuned, you know, and all of a sudden it's like it's ready for peak performance. So if that's what the question was about, you know, fret squeak, then there you go, I've answered that one. But if it was more about how do you move around those shapes, and one of the other questions that we had later on was, in fact, it was the next question, was how to change from normal chords into bar chords, right? So this is a really good question, this one. This crops up a lot. So let's say you're playing a track and you're playing, I don't know, let's say you're playing something and you're playing sort of G's, D's, kicking around in the key of D, the key of G maybe. And then all of a sudden there's a B minor. It's like, you know, you've got to get around into the B minor. You know, it requires a kind of a wrist reset to be able to change to that position. Or even better, let's say that you were playing something and you had to get from, say, E here, and you needed to get up to this B here, for argument's sake. So let's say you're playing a song, you're going from a chord that is E major, you want to play that E major because it's a big, beefy, well-rounded chord, especially if you're playing on an acoustic guitar. If you need to get from that E which we normally, the finger for that one, as you can see, is here. My first finger is here, and my other two are here. That's the correct way to finger that chord. So if you're going from that E, for argument's sake, to that B up there, then there's quite a lot of movement that's required there. So the most simple tip that I can give you that works the best, in fact, I'll throw a few points at you here. Number one, if you've got a big chord change to make, where you're going from a low down fret position to a high one, there's a couple of things you can do that can make that much easier. Number one is, as soon as you start playing that chord down there, literally as soon as you've got it and the strings are playing nice and clean, you've got it dialed in, immediately you need to be thinking about what comes next. Say you're on that chord for 4 beats. Don't wait until the end of the 4th beat to get ready for the next one. So many guitarists do this. They play the first chord, and then it's like, it's like, wow, you've caught them. All of a sudden, they've got to get to the other one quickly. But if you plan ahead in terms of knowing that you're going to go there, but then actually look at where you need to go before you need to go there. I don't know why this works, but I just know it does. And it's worked. I've seen it work hundreds of times with lots of different people. Look at where you need to play next. And this applies, by the way, not just for bar chords, but for any chords. If you're playing a particularly tricky chord progression, look at where you need to be before your hand goes there. It's just much easier to land it and target it accurately. But going back to the moving bar chord shapes, so if your E is there and your B is there, then don't play the E in that traditional way. Play that E with these fingers instead, because they're the fingers that will be playing that E once you've moved it up to the bar chord shape. So if you play that E with this finger spare, so to speak, then that's going to be much easier for you to then play that B there. So it's a bit like, have we got any pool players or snooker players here in the chat? We must have a few. So you'll know that if you ever play pool or snooker, the trick to, being a good pool or snooker player is you have to think a shot ahead. And it's the same with rhythm guitar. So if you're playing a chord progression, okay, if the chords are easy, if they're all open chords, you don't necessarily need to plan ahead. But if there's a tricky chord change in there, then planning ahead for it ahead of time makes it a lot easier. And that's really good advice for beginner guitarists. So let's talk about bar chords. It's too advanced for you. And let's say you're just struggling to get from G to D, which is a very early chord change that people really struggle to make, but it crops up all the time. So if you're doing that, then the same advice applies. You plan ahead before you need to do it. And look at where your fingers need to go before you need to do them. I don't know why that works, but it just does. Okay, I hope that helps. Let me have a look at the chat here and check I haven't missed anything. Oh, okay, we've got an answer here on the circle of fifths. Circle of fifths is useful when reading sheet music. You would use it to identify what flats or sharps would be in the key according to the key signature. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see how that will be. You can see how that will be helpful. Who else have we got in here? Michael Wood, been so busy practicing, I forgot about this. Robert Darling, Sierra Knight, changes learn all chords by keeping the index finger free for bar types. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Obvious tip. Oh, yeah, okay. Kind of was, I suppose, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. Mike Kane, Mike, silly question. But if you're playing a minor bar chord shape on the A string and you bar the B string instead of playing it normally, what kind of chord is that? Let's try and figure that out. If you are playing a minor bar chord shape on the A string, I assume he means like that, and you bar the B string instead of playing it normally. I don't quite understand the question. Sorry, Mike, if you want to put it in a different way, I will try and answer it. Yeah, great. All right, cool. Let's go on to the next question. Okay, can you run through the cage system? All right, I'm going to explain this briefly because what I'll do is I will link to, I wonder if I can just put it in the chat like right now when we're speaking about it. Let me see if I can do this. Hopefully this won't go too weird. Let me just drop this straight into the chat here for you. All right, so that is a guide on our site for the cage system. I've just dropped it in the chat. But the cage system, right? The cage system is one of those things where it's badly named, really, because it's not. I don't really see it as a system. Essentially, the way I remember it, it's actually just a mnemonic. I just use it as a way to remember the 5 movable shapes on the guitar, which are C, A, G, E, and D. All right, so if we look at them, so C chord looks like this, A chord looks like this, G chord looks like this, E chord is here, and a D chord is there. Now, one of the cool things is they're all movable, which means if we take those shapes and we move them around the neck and we bar behind them, then we raise the key as we go. So that's an A chord. But if I take that same shape and I move it up 2 frets and bar behind it, then that A becomes B because I've moved it up 2 frets. By me clamping my finger here, I've essentially shortened the strings, which means I've raised the key of the guitar. And I can keep going higher. C, D, E, F, G, and then back to A at the top there. So we've just used an A shape down here to play several different chords, haven't we, all up and down the neck? But you can also do that with C, A, G, E, D. So the cage system, to me, essentially, I just use it as a way to remember, okay, cool, I can move C shapes, I can move A shapes, I can move G shapes, I can move E shapes, and I can move D shapes. But 99% of the time, in my experience, you're only ever really moving A and E shapes. The vast majority of guitarists that I've come into contact with in my life, they just use A and E shapes. And I think once you can say that you can confidently play A and E shape bar chords, I think that's the point where you can say you're a guitarist, you know, you're an intermediate guitarist. Okay, you might not be, you know, Jimi Hendrix, you know what I mean? But you're no longer a beginner guitarist. Once you can play E and A shape bar chords, you can confidently say, yeah, I can play the guitar. And of course, there's always more stuff to learn. But that's an important threshold to reach for a guitarist, I think. And the good thing is, once you've mastered E and A shape bar chords, you can pretty much play any chord because you can just move those shapes all over the fretboard. So even though we think of caged as one overall system, most of the time in those 5 letters, C, A, G, E, D, most of the time we just use A and E. One cool thing that I will share with you, though, which I didn't know for years until someone pointed it out to me, is that the highest finger that you play up the fretboard always connects to the next letter of the cage system. This is quite handy to know for lead guitar. So if we play a C, so think of the word caged. So here's C. Okay, now if you think about that, we've gone from the C there, and then we go to our A shape. And then as you move that up the neck, cycling through those shapes, you're always playing at where that next one is. So if I show you the C there, but then I play the C with the A shape, this might take a minute to click for you. Let me try and explain it to you. All right, so that's our A. Following this okay? And then we go here. There's our G shape. Can you see how these are all C's? But actually, as we're going up the fretboard playing them, we get to those different shapes as we go. It's really cool. It's a really cool technique. I can't really play the D's. There it will be. Most of the time when I play the movable D shapes, I just play the D shape as a triad, because dropping on that one behind is just too much of a faff. I always find that really awkward to play. But from a lead guitar point of view, using the D triad as you move it around is really cool because it gives you some treble. That D shape is always on the first 3 strings, so you get that really high pitch noise. And that holds true across all of the chords. I hope you followed that okay. Was that okay? Everyone follow that all right? We're using a C shape there. Now we're using an A shape, but the C from the previous shape is the starting point for the next A. Same again there. We were on this fret for the prior chord. Now we're doing the G shape. this one here is the root note for the next one. That's pretty cool as you move it up. I didn't know that for years. All right, let's keep going. Can you run through the cage system? For more information on the cage system, click the link that I put in the chat just before, and you'll see the full guide on the site, which explains it in much more detail than I just went through them. Okay, we've got a question here from Graham. Okay, great question from Graham. When looking at guitars, I see mention of the neck profile shape. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the different shapes when looking for a new guitar? Really, really good, great question. So we often speak about the importance of the shape of a guitar to the person's body who's playing it. And this is one of those things that most beginners, they don't even think about really. They just get any guitar and then start learning with that guitar. But the shape of a guitar, as it relates to the shape of your body as a human being, really matters. If you're a very small person and you don't want to play a jumbo acoustic guitar, and you know, this is one of those things that it sounds obvious, but like no one thinks of it. You've got this massive object in front of you. You know, this is an auditorium guitar, so it's got a very low cut here on both sides. It might not look it on the screen here, but this is a very small guitar, sits really low on the knee, which means it's very accessible, and it's very thin from front to back. It's way thinner than the dreadnoughts and jumbos that I have. So that's the body shape. But what this question that Graham's asked is about the neck profile. So he's speaking about the actual shape of the neck here. So if you can imagine the neck of the guitar chopped downwards, you know, like the actual cross section of the guitar. And it does make a massive difference, Graham. So thanks for the question, mate, because this is something that hardly ever gets spoken about, really, I don't think. It's not a question that we get asked much. But it makes a massive difference. First of all, what I would say is I'm not a gear guy. I'm not one of those people who knows every model of guitar and reads reviews on it and all that. You know, that's not my jam. It's just not what I come to music for. So I'm not the best person to answer this. But what I would say is, from a strictly practical hands on the guitar side of things, it makes a huge difference. If you hold a classical acoustic guitar, for example, and feel the neck of that, and what you'll often find is that the neck profile on them, it's squared at the edges, so it's like a 90-degree angle at the top of the guitar here and at the bottom, and they're really, really thick necks. Now that's okay from a classical point of view if that's the way you want to go and you've got quite big hands. But if you're, I don't know, let's say you're a teenage boy or you're a petite adult, and that is not the type of guitar you want to learn on at all. It's really unyielding and difficult to play on a guitar like that. So my preference is for beginner guitarists to have really thin necked guitars. And that's one of the reasons why electric guitars can be good. Something like a Telecaster, like I was just using here. With acoustic guitars, you get a massive variety of thicknesses on guitars, and it really matters a lot. So what I would say is, Graham, it's a bit of a cop-out answer, mate, but it's the best one I can offer, is go and get hands-on with it. You don't need to be a great guitarist to know whether something feels comfortable in your hand or not. So go to an actual physical guitar shop. There are some still out there, although they're dwindling every year, which is just awful. Go to an actual guitar shop, get hands-on with it, feel it. Just play a couple of chords that you know, chord changes, play a few songs that you know well, and feel how the neck feels in your hand. You want it to be inviting and approachable and easy to play. And there's subtle differences in neck profiles, and they make a massive difference. To me, one of the main ones is the actual just thickness of the neck, but then also how it's rounded at the front. And what you find is that most guitars, you think that they're like a right angle, but they're not. Most of them have got a little bit of a it's like they've just been filed or the edge has been shaved off them. And if it's rounded on the top edge, it makes it much easier to play. I hope that answers your question, Graham. I'm sorry I'm not a big gear guy. I would like to give you a more like, oh, you need a, you know, specific diameter neck or whatever. I'm sorry, mate, I don't know it in that much detail. But in terms of pure playability and accessibility of the instrument, I hope that helps. All right, another question here, another one that we get a lot. I hope I'm not rattling through these too quick. What are the best finger exercises? All right, so what I would say again is we've got a full guide on the site that covers this in lots of detail. Adam put something together for us a few months ago. It was a really awesome list of finger exercises. But just my input would be super quick. In terms of finger exercises, the main thing that you're after is what? I'm assuming that you don't have any like health problems or mobility problems or any issues with your dexterity here. But warm-up exercises, so literally, again, if you just Google National Guitar Academy finger exercises, you'll find a full guide on this with tabs, which will show you exactly how to approach it. But the way I warm up when I play is I just go through the major scale, and then I'll go through the natural minor scale, and then some. And also generally, I'll kind of start quite slow. And then I'll go through the natural minor scale. And then I'll just jam for a while, and I find that that loosens me up and kind of gets me in the zone as much as I need to. But I know that some people take it super serious and they'll kind of like stretch out their fingers. You can use a finger exerciser if you just go onto Amazon and, you know, just search for, I think it is finger strengthener, I think it is. And it's like a little plastic device that sits across your palm, and it's got 4 adjustable springs in it, and you kind of press down on each one. And I know that that's really good for strengthening up your fingers, especially your little finger and your ring finger as well. It's really useful for that. And yeah, as Bill's just put in the chat there, best way to warm up your fingers, do scales. Kat, thank you, good comment there. Try Epiphone for a smaller neck. That's what I'm playing here. It's got a nice, small, easy to play neck on it. Let me check I haven't missed anything here in the chat. Yeah, Jeff, I need a thin neck guitar because of having small hands. Yes, mate, it's a really big help. It's a massive help. It's like the best possible thing you can do for someone with small hands that, you know, instantly makes things a lot easier is get them a guitar that has a thin neck, because it immediately extends your reach. Some of you will have heard me talk about this before, but as a guitarist, there is a finite distance between your thumb and your first finger, and that's your reach as a guitarist. So if you can think, if you're here and you're playing something, then if your thumb, you know, and remember, I play a lot of the time with my thumb up here because I'm lazy. I've got into bad habits over the years, but most of the time for beginners, you want your thumb to be kind of halfway down the neck, about there. For most chords, that's where you want your fingers to be. And then you move your wrist forwards, and then that's what gives you the reach. So, so Jeff, where you just said about having small hands, that's something you need to be aware of, mate, is drop your thumb down and move your wrist forwards. It gives you way more reach. And for people with small hands, it's a game changer. The only problem is when you first do it, it will feel really precarious and you'll feel really unbalanced and unsupported because you're so used to having your hand more snug on the neck. But what you find is that the more you do it, of course, you get used to it and then you develop that more control. But by dropping your thumb down and moving your wrist forwards, you get way more reach. So that's, yeah, cool point. Thank you for mentioning that one. There's so much good stuff here in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for all of this. This is great. Bill, what gauge are you using? Oh, what gauge are you using, Cherry? I have my guitar restrung with lighter strings, but the first 3 strings are the same. It confuses me when I'm running chords. Should I change strings? Cherry, what I would say is if you're relatively new, get some extra light gauge strings added onto your guitar because they're much gentler on your fingers. They're thinner strings and they're easier to press down. So it's easier on your fingers and you can fret the chords more cleanly. I play off quite heavy gauge strings now because I like having that big, deep tone. But for most beginners, it doesn't matter. I mean, on this guitar, I think we've got extra light gauge strings. But it makes a massive difference. Again, there's not that many things that you can do as a guitarist that make things a lot easier instantly. But one of them is putting extra light gauge strings on your guitar. Be careful when you try to buy them because most of the time, if you go into a guitar shop, they'll give you light gauge, but you actually want extra light. They're the ones that you need. All right, cool. Let's keep going. Okay, so the next question is, and by the way, I think what we need to do for these is we'll have to timestamp these questions, I think. I think that's what we'll have to do, and then put them in the video description. So if someone watches this video after today, if they're not live, then we can or if you guys want to refer back to it, if we timestamp them in the description, then you'll very quickly be able to go to those. I think we can add that tomorrow. All right, next question. What are we on here? Oh, nice one, fingerstyle. All right, so any tips for doing fingerstyle and jazzing up finger picking patterns? All right, I'm going to switch over to the acoustic here because I want to make a couple of points on this. All right, so fingerstyle guitar is probably, it's my favorite type of guitar, I would say, because that's how I mostly play at home. So I almost always just play with my fingers. I like the sense of connection that it gives me to the guitar. I like the lower attack that you get. So of course, using a pick is great because it allows you to, there's certain techniques that you can only do with a pick. But of course, you get a more twangy, there's more attack when you use a pick. But when you use your fingers, you get a slightly gentler tone. So what that means is that when you're sounding out notes, you get a softer feel, which I like. And for a lot of the stuff that I do now, because I'm getting old and soft and wimpy, a lot of the stuff that I do is it's more gentle now. It's kind of softer melodies. It's not as rocky and mad as the stuff I used to play when I was younger. So as far as fingerstyle is concerned, what I would say is if you want to just getting started with fingerstyle, then initially it's really important that you simplify it as much as you can. And the best way to do that is to just use your thumb and your first finger just for a little while. Now, this can be, some people are like, no, that's not what I want. I want to get busy and use all my fingers. But what you'll find is that once you start adding in this finger, your ring finger, things get much, much harder. It's very important when you're starting off with fingerstyle guitar that you just build things up slowly. So if I just use my thumb and my first finger, everything's much, much simpler and easier to do. And also, if you've got an electric guitar, play on a kind of wet tone, add some reverb onto the amp, and you can get some lovely sounds just playing dyads just with those two fingers. Let me just boost this up a little. So you can hear with that reverb and delay that's on the amp, just using those two fingers, you can create a really nice mood and a nice kind of soundscape. Now, of course, if you were using an acoustic guitar, then that won't fill the room if you're just playing those two notes, but it's still the way I like people to begin. So let's say you're playing in an open chords, and you're playing something in the key of C. Okay, so that might seem really, really simple to some of you who can already do fingerstyle. But the trick is that initially when you start playing, you just want to get comfortable alternating the thumb with the first finger. And as soon as you add in extra fingers, it gets way, way harder. So just focus on those two to begin with, and then that just keeps things manageable. If you're wondering what notes to play on each chord you go to, if you just use those two fingers, and you always want to target the root note of the chord and the string that's underneath it, that's the best place to use those two fingers. So if I'm playing a C chord, then I'm going to use my thumb on the fifth string where the root note is, and I'm going to play underneath. Yeah, and that's how you begin. Super simple. When you change to a G chord, I really love the simplicity of just playing those dyad shapes. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I play that way a lot now, choice. But of course, once you get comfortable doing that, you want to add those extra fingers as well. So at that point, then only once you've got comfortable with that alternate picking, then you can add in the middle finger. But it gets much more complex when you add that in. There's more going on. But to me, that's the point where once you're using those three, that's the point where you feel like, oh yeah, this is it. Like I'm doing it. I'm finger picking. This is fingerstyle guitar, and it's gorgeous. It's a lovely way to play. And you can play the guitar like that all the time. Most of the time when I play at home, I'm finger picking. Not necessarily picking, but fingerstyle. What I would say is hold off from adding your ring finger, because that's the one where it's like, whoa, it just blows people's minds. When I've taught fingerstyle to loads of people over the years, they can follow me okay with those two. And some of them are okay once you start using the middle finger as well. But as soon as you add the ring finger, it's just there's too much going on and people can't take that on board straight away. But of course, eventually, as you get comfortable with it, you can use all 5 fingers. You get a much richer kind of tone. But also, what I like about once you're playing with your fingers, it's not necessarily picking. It's the percussive things that you can add. So if you're playing with your fingers, you can do stuff like you can start doing that type of thing where you're hitting the strings. You're almost using the guitar like a drum. And that particular technique, that's only possible because you're playing with fingers. That's something you can't really do with a pick. So there's loads of different, right-hand techniques that come into view when you start using your fingers. Love that stuff. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sort of flamenco technique. And Bill, you love the stepping stone chords, learned and progressed so much after I played them. Yeah, great, Bill, great. Thanks for letting us know, mate. That's an absolute cornerstone of how I teach stepping stone chords. Again, anybody here that's not aware of that, just Google National Guitar Academy stepping stone chords and you'll get the free download that's got all of our really easy chord shapes. All right, I hope that's... Oh, there's one last part of that question, sorry. So that question was, any tips for doing fingerstyle and jazzing up finger picking patterns? That was the second part of that question. So what I would say is, if you want to kind of jazz up what you're playing fingerstyle, a great way to do that is just with hammer-ons. So like if you're playing a... well, there you go, just in that shape I was playing a C sharp minor 7. But I didn't just play the chord, I hammered it on. So you get that. You get 2 tones. A bit of vibrato changes the feel, but it doesn't need to be that complicated. It could just be you were playing a D chord. You had a hammer-on in there. Or a pull-off. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Obviously, I can't teach how to play fingerstyle guitar in one thing, but I hope that's given you some new ideas. Oh, one last thing. If you're playing fingerstyle guitar, a great way to present things in a balanced way, and also to make things easy for you, is to pick one bar chord shape and stay in it. So, for example, if you're playing a chord progression and you're doing it fingerstyle, then you don't really want to be changing between playing, say, these 4 and then the 4 below and then the 4 below, because that just makes it harder to make it fluid. But if you just stay using E shapes, for example, then you can just stay on those 4 strings the whole time, for example. So if let's say the chord progression was E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, something in the key of E, then then what's cool about that is if I play all those chords using E-shaped bar chords, then my fingers can just stay on those 4 strings the whole time. It's really cool. You don't need to worry about that when you're just playing with a pick and you're banging away. But when you're targeting specific strings with your fingers, it's a lot easier if you can just stay on the same strings. So whatever bar chord shape you choose to use, stick with it throughout the full progression. Makes things a lot easier. All right, we're nearly out of time here, folks, but I'm going to do one more question. I think we've got time to squeeze this in. Okay, question here from Paul, which was some practice tips, please. All right, so tips for practice. The things that are always my sort of go-to practice tips are basically don't practice scales, practice, you know, the best way to practice is to learn songs that you love. That's the most important thing. It's pick music that you absolutely love, that means something to you, that reminds you of when you were a special time in your life, or just something that makes you feel like, oh, you know, it connects with you. That's the stuff that you want to learn, because that's the stuff that you'll get the most pleasure from. And that when you come to practice it, it won't be like, oh yeah, I've got to do that practice. It's like, oh yeah, cool, I'm going to practice. It's something that you'll enjoy. So tip number 1 for practice is learn songs that you love. Just don't bother learning any stuff just for the sake of an exercise. Play stuff that you love, learn stuff that you love. Tip number 2, practice little and often. Don't save all of your practice up for the weekend, like for a 3-hour block on a Sunday, because something happens at the weekend and all of a sudden your practice is gone for the whole week. Just practice little and often. 5 to 10 minutes a day is plenty. If you can do more, then do more. But I think everybody can find 5 minutes in the day to do something. And it's keeping that momentum going and that repetition that matters most. Practice every day if you can. And yet, two final points to make on this. Keep your guitar out. Don't lock it in a case somewhere and put it in some obscure room of the house. Keep your guitar out. Have it hanging on a guitar hanger on the wall that you walk past. Put it in a place in the house where you walk past it several times so you can just quickly pick it up and play. That's a game changer for a lot of people. If it's in a locked case somewhere, it's just not going to get played. Or if it does, you've got to plan to go and do it. What you want is to be able to pick it up and just play for a few minutes while you're on your way out, and you know, you're waiting for somebody to find the car keys or the kids to put the shoes on, or you know, whatever it might be, I don't know. But you want to be able to just pick up and play for a few minutes here and there with no barriers to that. Keep the guitar out and somewhere where you'll see it each day. And then lastly, purely for motivation, record yourself playing. So one of the things that I used to do, I don't do it now, but I used to do is I used to record my students playing something, so that in a month's time, when they were like, oh, I'm just not making any progress, it's like it's doing my head in, I would say, well, hang on a minute. And then I would show them the clip of them playing a month ago. And they were like, wow, I was really bad. I didn't realize I used to be that bad. So it can be really good for your motivation to record yourself and then look back at it when you know, and you can see like, wow, yeah, I really have got a lot better. But if you don't do that, then you don't see all those incremental steps. To you, it doesn't seem like you're getting better when actually you are. I hope that's helped. Everybody, there's like 50 questions that we didn't even get to today. I'm so sorry, but I just tackled the ones that were upvoted the most. I feel like we did quite a lot of sort of intermediate stuff today. I don't think we hit on enough beginner stuff today, but maybe we could cover that off in another live stream in the future. Or maybe we even need to start doing separate ones so that it's just beginner and then just more sort of advanced stuff. I don't know. Everybody, thank you so much. It's just amazing to see all your comments coming in. And yeah, thank you. I'm just reading all of your comments here. Kat, Hilly Billy, Shug, Bill. Love this live stream, mate. Can't wait for the next one. Oh, thanks, Bill. Thanks, mate. Yeah, R.I.P. Eddie Van Halen. Absolutely gutted. I know, yeah. Yeah, everyone, thank you for joining us. This is our first ever live stream. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said at the start, we're just trying to put some positivity and fun out into the world. Feels like things are quite gloomy at the moment, and I just wanted to have some fun with you guys, drink some Guinness, answer some questions, and just connect with you all in a more of an interactive way. All right, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll be in touch soon. Thanks very much for supporting the work we do. It means the world to me. Thank you. Bye for now.